All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is getting close to Christmas, the end of the year, so this will be the last webinar I'll be doing this year anyway, and we'll continue in January. Now, this is primarily for members of the Insider Club, but I decided to open it up and expose or show other people what I'm working on, what I'm doing. I thought I might have some more interest in joining the Insider Club. So there are selfish reasons for my doing that, but those people don't have who are not members of the Insider Club don't have my files, so they really can't do all the things I'm doing. And I'm constantly updating things, as you know. If anybody just recently came in, this is the PDF file, which is essentially a continuation of what I did in the past. Now, the theme of this webinar is prospecting for low-risk entries, which I've discussed, I believe, the past two webinars, and this is based upon primarily looking for low pivots and especially low pivots in stocks that are uptrending that have pulled back a little bit and are potentially setting up again to go. So I'm going to be working with those screens primarily. The thing about these setups, as you all know, even when you take a trade, the trades are always random, or the outcome is always random. We don't know what's going to happen, of course, when we put a trade on, and that's why we control our risk. Usually, or always, for me anyway, with an initial stop after I do my position sizing and so on. But let me go ahead and get started. That PDF file, I just want to look at it very briefly. This is what I put together starting a couple of weeks ago, and these are the primary views that I'm using. Bullish pivots, unconfirmed and confirmed. I primarily work with the unconfirmed, but I'll explain the difference. What I'm looking for are stocks that have pulled back slightly, but it looks like buyers are coming into them. You can read all this stuff on your own. If you have any questions, just let me know. I did add another chart here, which I'll show you. This chart was in the files the last time. I added another chart today because I wanted the fan visible, the 18, the 50, 100, and the 200-day exponential moving averages. This one above has the 3, 6, 18, and 50. But stocks that are on long-term trends have what's called a fan formation, where the exponential moving averages are all stacked. So I wanted to have that chart included. That's why it's in there. These green lines, as you'll see many times over, represent where a stock is generating a pivot based upon my filters. And if the stock breaks past the high of the prior day, that's an early entry or a trigger to go higher. So low risk entry, this is actually where I started today. Changes to my files since the last webinar. I added that chart I just told you about. I am going to show you the low pivot warehouse views to show more pertinent information. Modified the most active filters to allow most stocks to pass. And added IBD Innovator ETF leaders. Jim, it's not on my end. It's on your end. If you had to log on twice. I don't know why that happened, but I don't believe anybody else has had trouble with the audio, right? If you have, say yes. Otherwise, don't say anything. Okay, so what else do I have? I added these IBD Innovator ETF scans a couple weeks ago. Uh, I assume, I really don't know how often they update this, but it's evidently from IBD. And these are contained in our ETF scans, and I just made them accessible to us. And here's a new one, ETF Leaders, that is available under your IBD Innovator ETF scans. And these are just a couple of sorts that I'm going to be working with today. And this information here just talks about before you do these scans, you probably want to limit the type of stocks that you're looking for. If you're interested only in stocks with quarterly earnings growth and so on, you go to my number 16 earnings momentum folder, make a group, and then scan on that rather than scanning the whole universe. Okay? Everyone, okay. Well, it's usually it's always on your end when you don't have audio, and I'm just saying that I'm not being accusatory or anything, but uh, if most people are hearing, it's on your end. Okay. I'm glad you can hear now, Michael. So we're up to 25 people. Yeah, don't worry about it. There's the PDF again that I just covered. Anyway, as you can see, and you know this by now, I like to set up my monitor with the warehouse views and my scans. I like a weekly chart and I like a daily chart, and my daily charts will vary. Now let's take a look at this chart here. This is chart. Well, I'm on the wrong chart. Sorry about that. I'm going to go to chart number 4 here. And these charts you will find under the intraday and end of day expansion contraction charts. And I call them that because that's what they are. They're you can see that this is a stock that's really been in contraction. It was expanding here, and it's been in contraction, and it pulled back here, and now it's breaking out, it looks like. A lot of stocks seem to be breaking out today. But this histogram shows the difference between the 3 and the 6-day exponential moving averages. This one between the 6 and the 18, and then these are the pocket pivots. Now let's compare this to the chart that I put in here. It's got some more information in it. It's essentially the same chart though. I left the force ribbons up here. Let me see, there should be a force 2 and 13. I think I buried it somewhere. There we go. 13's on top. Let me make this full screen. I had the window hidden on here. 13 period force index. Here's the 2-day, which is a short term. So that's in here. I also put the volume point of control 10 period back in this chart. And then this histogram here is the comparison between the 18 and 15. So you can see expansion, short term, very short term. Actually, this is a micro trend. This is short term, and this is more intermediate term here. And it's just the difference between the moving averages. I mean, there's really no magic to this, but it gives us a nice visual, and you can actually see what's going on. Now let's get into some of the screens, and what I'm going to do is I'm using my warehouse views, and I'm just typing pivot in here. I don't know if you use this. I've said this before. If you're not using the quick pick and the search, you're spending time that you don't need to spend. Now, these are the low pivots, unconfirmed, and here's the intraday. For those of you who are not using Thinkorswim as a data source intraday, you're missing out because it works great in conjunction with HGSI, and you can find trades during the day that you certainly cannot find at night. I mean, you can find them at night, but a lot of those trades may not work out. Let's just go ahead and do this. What I'm going to do, though, is rather than working with all securities, you can see this gives me way too many stocks to work with, to look at. I'm not going to look at 493 anyway. I just really look at the top ones. But let's go into a different group. I'm just going to show you one option right here. I'm going to say choose group. And if you're an HGSI user, you're familiar with smart groups. Smart groups are different groups under different people who have contributed filters, and primarily filters to HGSI, and these groups are generated every night. Now I'm going to go into mine and Ian's and mine. We've had this going for years, and as most of you know, Ian passed away over 3 years ago now, but I've just left his name on here because we worked on these together. But I'm going to go. I'm going to go into this one right here to begin with. Leaders, raw relative strength, raw group right combo. What does that mean? It means that these are high relative strength stocks that have been driven to the top of the list, and then those stocks, that group, was truncated. In other words, it takes the top 100 stocks automatically every night and creates a group. Now, when I put this low pivot unconfirmed on here, this is from last night. This is the information from last night. And the beauty of I'm updating in the background. It's updating every 5 minutes. So when you see that hourglass, that's what's going on. The beauty of using this with the Thinkorswim is this is old information from last night. If I want to see what's happening with these today, I just go down to low pivot, unconfirmed, stocks intraday. I automatically sort on what's called a combo rank. Most of you know what a combo rank is. If there's anybody in here that doesn't, it's really just data fields which are driving the stock, and I'll show you this very quickly. The way I built this is I allocated 33% to the volume, to the one-day change, and to the daily range, and then that drives these stocks to the top of the list. So Cassava Sciences, it's a $1.92 stock, so it's not hard to attain 14.29%, but it goes to the top of the list because of the big price gain for the day and the range and the volume. So that's how the combo works. I know most of you know this, but there's a few people on here that may not know it. So that's why I'm going through it. Let's go to number 2. It's a $37.51 stock right now. It's up 6.26% today. Volume's heavy, and this is the stock, 47. You can see that, let's see if I can make this a little bit larger here. Long base. This was a move up, and you can see there were pocket pivots here. There was an effort to rise VPA flag. Huge effort to rise flag here. And then it kind of stalled. It pulled back a little bit. But see this green line right here? This is an example of the pivot. It's pulling back, but it closed at the top or near the top of its daily range. If I go back to last night, and I'm going to do that, so it's at 47 that's easy enough to remember. So if we look at 47 from last night, you can see that its closing range was 85.46%. So, Jack, it came up last night. What I'm showing you here, This is the way I've got it set up. The same, and I should clarify this, the same filter which is applied to last night's data to generate this information is also in the intraday. So these were screened out last night out of the leader's raw relative strength, and there are 8 of them. And then when I go here, let me just do it up here on the quick pick. That stock is coming up in the intraday also, but the signal was generated yesterday. This is where it closed at the 80-some% of its daily range. So by tying both views into the same filter, that information is carried over from last night to intraday, so you can really see which stocks are moving or following through intraday. That's why this combination of HGSI and free data from Thinkorswim, if you have an account there, is tremendous. So, and this is where if you join the Skype board, and if you're an HGSI user, you're all welcome to join the Skype board. You're going to see there's 4 or 5 or 6 people who are very active. When I'm around, I try to be active, but they're always finding stocks during the day, and they're usually using, well, I assume they're always using these intraday screens. Frank, if you look at your view or your filter, this is the way I've set my filter up. This is a little bit confusing here because I'm not going to go in to explain exactly what they are. Days high is high, days low is low, and days close is high. These are things that I've worked out. How do you get to the Skype board? Michael, just send me an email at ron@highgrowthstock.com, and I'll send you the link. Okay, anyway, percent range, it has to be at 30% of its daily range. In other words, I want the lower wick to be at least 30%, preferably much higher, okay? But this stuff is a little bit complicated to explain in a webinar, so I'm not even going to attempt. But just believe me that these pivots work. Let's take a look at one other one here. Let's go down to global blood therapy. The way I have this chart set up, now here was a pivot right here, but this pivot was never executed according to my rules, because it certainly didn't take the prior day out. If you did an intraday here, yeah, I mean, if you use the high of this here following the pivot day, you would have been in, and you'd have been fine if you'd have used this low. You'd have been stopped out today, though, for some or yesterday, if you used, well, maybe not. 4 cents under that, you may not have been stopped out. It's close, but anyway, here's another pivot. There must have been some bad news here. This was a pocket pivot, a negative pocket pivot rather than a positive pocket pivot, but it looks like the stock is recovering today. Let's see if I can find some other examples here. I haven't really mentioned why I like to have the weekly chart here too. A couple of reasons. I can see the VPA flags, and I can see the buying power here, and I can see if there have been a couple of weekly charts that have broken out here from a base. I like to see 2 higher highs, and that would be a higher high than the prior week, and here's a higher high here. And then you look at the weekly for strength, and then you can really trade off of the daily, if that makes sense. But let me find a little larger group here. This is not providing me a lot of opportunities. Let me go in here to choose group again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to this consistent earnings growth folder and go down to the second one. Now these are what Ian referred to as box stocks, BOX, because they have consistent earnings growth. And you can see that I'm getting 54 out of here. So let's work with this one rather than the other one, which only had about 8 stocks. Okay, and let me do this here. Low pivot unconfirmed, 54 stocks. If I go down to number 2, where the fan up is required, that cuts it down to 31 stocks. So 31 stocks, you know these stocks are in an uptrend. They may not be a strong uptrend, but the moving averages are all stacked properly. This column right here is my EMA fan column, which tells me that these stocks are in an uptrend. If I go back to this view, you can see that some of these are not in an uptrend. So by moving to the fan up, I can concentrate only on stocks that are moving up. So let's take a look at some of these, but I want to go to the intraday version. So Ardmore Shipping, I believe the shipping stocks, many of them, you can see there's 2 here in a row, are moving up today. And these are, what are they? They're consistent earnings growth stocks. I'm just going to do a quick check, change to the industry group, and you can see that there are 5 marine shipping stocks out of the that are moving up that have passed this filter today. Let's just take a look at these stocks, okay? So here's your pivot. Stock was in the expansion mode, a little 2-day contraction here. Here's your pivot. It gapped down yesterday. Here's your opening gap, and it closed near the high, and today it's taking off. And if well, I don't need to do that. I can go look at this right here. It's up $6.16%, and trading near the top of its range. Look at these stocks. They're all trading near the top of their ranges. C-SPAN is at 88% of its range. Now this is the intraday range. This is the one that's trading with most volume. Let me bring that chart back to the top, and you can see the volume right here in this window. So this little magenta tip here, that is the projected volume for the day. This is a formula that Matt worked out when he was programming. He's comparing the current time, the volume from right now, the current time, to where it was at approximately this time yesterday. Doesn't always work, but it works pretty well. So I use that a lot. So we're getting a confirmed up move here. Now you can see on the weekly chart that this stock has been basing between 10.5 and looks like that week what got up to close to 12, pulled back. But notice that most of these weekly candles, not all of them close near their high, okay? And then today, so that means over the week, if they're closing near their high of their weekly range, they're more than likely under accumulation, and you can see that the volume has come into this stock and remained there. Now this weekly chart looks a lot different than the daily, of course. You can see it came down here. Here was a pivot right here, and this was a beautiful pivot. It closed near the high, generated a big green bar. Now there is a rose colored bar right next to it. The reason this is rose is because this stock was in a counter trend. My definition of a counter trend is when the 3-day exponential moving average is below the 6-day. The 3 is green, the 6 is red. And that's why it generated this, and also the volume point of control was negative. But what happens here? We get a low volume test on the VPA. We get a confirmation of that test. A lot of people call it a J flag because one of our users, Jay Robinson, said he always, I don't think Jay's on, but looks for this combination. And what we had an effort to rise at the same time. And then this stock digested that for several days. But look what happened during those several days. This stock closed in the upper range of all these candles except for this one. There was a wick, and what happened? It caused a little selling the next day, and then yesterday we had a green bar. Why? We had a pivot, and here it's taken off today. So as you can see, or at least in my estimation, these generate some good signals. As I mentioned when I first started this webinar today, it doesn't always mean they're going to follow through. Sometimes they do fall through, and I've been caught like everybody else has. You buy a stock and it pulls back, but your risk here is much less if you buy over the high of the day. That's an early entry, but if you put your stop down here, that's your risk between here and here. And you position size based upon that using my spreadsheet. If you're an Insider Club member, you get the spreadsheet with all the calculations built in for you. All you have to do is enter the high and the low, and it'll give you your position size and everything. I hope most of you are using that spreadsheet if you're trading, because it really helps you get your position size correct. Okay, now I can't go back. You can see that's ghosted. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to choose the group again, and I'll just make this easier. I'm going to go back to Ian Woodward and Ron Brown. I'm going to consistent earnings growth, and here it is. It's the first subfolder. This is all of the stocks. These other smart groups are consistent earnings growth with certain criteria applied in the filter. I usually just work off the top group because it lets all the stocks pass. Okay? Let me open this up all the way. We'll just take a look at some of these. So all of these stocks had pivots, but if they're red, more than likely they didn't execute. You didn't go into them, but you can. Let me see if I can find something here. Here's one that's down 0.83 AutoZone, very expensive stock. I'm looking for one that may have gapped open and now is trading in the lower end of its range. Well, let's just take a look at this one. It's a biotech. Well, it really didn't go. It didn't get to the buy point. So I'm not going to waste any more time doing that. But what I'm looking for are early in the morning are stocks that are showing positive gains, trading in the upper part of their range, and then you can put a trade on. Ideally, you're having volume associated with it. And strangely enough, look at that, there's only 2 stocks in this list that are trading above their average 90-day moving average volume. I'm surprised on a day like this. I haven't looked because I was gone all morning. I don't know what the average, if the volume on the overall market is heavy or light. Let's take a look here. if I can find it. Well, it looks like, well, here up on the NYSE, it's really light. Look at this compared to yesterday. The NASDAQ, which is very strong today, volume, it's less than yesterday, but it's in the average range here. So good volume day, it looks like, on the NASDAQ. Okay. Now, since the bell has rung, I'm going to go into intraday options, and I'm going to just use manual updates, and that'll speed up my my process a little bit. Okay. So these are consistent earnings growth stocks. As I mentioned in the PDF file, you should probably find a group of stocks that really interest you, and let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go get a list of stocks that are showing consistent earnings growth. And this is, I've got all these screens in here for you. You don't have to do any work except look for stocks and take the trades and control your risk. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to go to folder number 16. It's called Earnings Momentum. And let's use the EPS and revenue growth with rising earnings estimates in the current quarter. There's a lot of stocks that meet that criteria, 586. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a group of these stocks. I'm going to use my alternate G keys. EPS and rev growth estimates positive, just so I know where I am. I think somebody came in late. Here's the PDF file. I don't need an index. Well, let's go ahead and generate the index. So one thing about HGSI, you can generate an index, and what it's going to do is show you the index of all the stocks in this group. Looks like my computer's a little bit slow today. And after all that, let's see if I can find that index. Take the filter off. Okay. Okay, let me zoom out on this. These are how I use a market cap weighting on this indexing, but since this rally began, these stocks, the 587 stocks in this list, this is how they've performed since this rally began. And these are stocks that have earnings growth and revenue growth. So if I bring, let's just take it off, I'll take it from right here to the current price. So that this group of stocks, the whole thing, and it's a large group's up 11.6% over 51 periods. And anybody off the top of their head know what the S&P has done over that time? It doesn't look like these have outperformed that much. But anyway, let me go back to this. So I've got my group in place. And now I want to locate stocks showing pivots. I'll just type pivot in here. Low pivot unconfirmed. Let's do the fan up. What that does is it knocks it down to 46 securities. And here is that marine shipping, which came up before. So this tells me immediately that this stock has good earnings growth. And what you do is you open up the fundamental panel, and you can see that these numbers are all positive for the last 4 quarters, which is comparing these numbers to the same quarter 1 year ago. And the revenue growth is also positive. And the next quarter estimate, if this is correct, or the current quarter estimate, is projected to be up 1,300%. So that's a pretty lofty projection for the current quarter. But this is why these stocks are passing the screen. Now, not all of these stocks are going to have big numbers like that for projections, but the earnings certainly are projecting out well, and they've been good. This is another shipping company. Let's take a look here at, there's another shipping company. How about Yandex? Okay, here's Yandex, and I'm going to zoom in on this today. Here is your pivot today. So let's just make this full screen. So if using the high from yesterday, here's where it opened, it traded down, it looks like, and it took out yesterday's high. The risk would just be down slightly less than the low end of this wick, and you'd be in this stock if you are following these rules. This is really known as a universal trigger because it's taking out the prior day's high. And the only thing I really don't like about this is, volume is not very impressive today. It is in a fan. This is a fan I've been talking about. The 200, the 100, the 50, and the 18. So it is in an uptrend, and the group has been going up too. So everything is positive on here. The only thing I don't like on this, like I said, is really the lack of volume. But the VPA flag is an effort to rise here. Just one example of the pivots. This is an internet media company. Let's go to a retailer. And you can see the pivot here. This stock has really been in a long congestion mode. Here's the weekly chart. It's been working its way a little bit higher, but it's been basing for a long time, and you can tell that by looking down here at the 3 versus the 6. Yes, there were some spikes up here, but then it collapsed. It went down. It went from green to red, and it's basing again. But there is your pivot and the entry point today. There's a few more people coming in. I'm going to post that PDF for them. So, this isn't an ideal stock by any means. It's really been basing for a long time. The group has not been doing much at all. You can tell this is the dotted line. The stock's pretty much trading along with the group. So those are the things that I like to look at. Obviously, the trend is up, and it's moved up from 92 to 116 approximately, and over 6 months, that's pretty good. It's very good. A little bit loose. I like to see more of a move up without the interspersing down weeks like that. But anyway, let's just move on. What I want to talk about is, in addition to looking at these, I want to show you how you can sort a view. I'm going to get away from the fan and just go to the low pivot, and there's 72 stocks in here. Now if you look at your PDF file, there's a couple of sorts towards the end. I just want to show you how you can use this to organize what you're looking for. And I'm going to use the night view or the end of day view. And if you look onto the last page, I say sort by the VPA signal. The reason I put this in here is I only want to first look at stocks that are showing a VPA signal today. So if I sort on VPA, and then you see this column right here, VPA signal, if it's a yes, these are the stocks that had a VPA flag. And if you look over here, you can see what those signals were. This days since means that it happened today. Now I have some secondary sorts here too. It's probably not going to be as effective on this, but I'll do it anyway. Last VPA signal condition. If you want a multiple sort, you click on this A to Z and you go into the field and you just type VPA in here, and I want the last VPA signal condition. And then on the third one, I want the days since the last VPA, so I type VPA again, select days since, and I want this ascending rather than descending. And then what it does is it sorts these according to the signal and the days since. So you can see that what this did, it kept all of these signals where there's a VPA flag today. This is still at the top, but what it did on the other sorts is put all of the tests for supplies together. So if you're looking for a test for supply, which means that a stock traded down and then closed up near its high, it's all right here for you. Let's just take a look at one of these stocks. This is end of day. I do not know if this stock followed through today, but I'm going to look at this, and no, it didn't follow through today. Here is where the signal was generated. There's your test for supply and your pivot, but it gapped lower, but this is a trade that would not be taken because it didn't go through the high of the prior day. So you would just ignore this trade. Let's see if I can find another. I'll just run through another test for supply. See if I can find one that worked out here. Here's another one that did not execute yet. Let me move this out of the way. Here's your test for supply yesterday. Here's another one today. Traded down. Notice the new wick. And on this one, tomorrow, if I were going to take this trade, what I would do is I'd put a buy stop above the prior day's wick, just to prove that it can do it, and then the risk would be just below this lower wick here. I'm not finding exactly what I want to find, but let's do this. This is another trick you can use, and I have shown this before. I'm going to, and this may seem confusing to you, but it's really not. You turn off the combo, and what that does is it keeps my end of day combo, which is showing the stocks in demand, but I've changed all that because I'm sorting on these other things. So I'm disengaging the combo, and what I'm doing is I'm going to go down to the low pivot intraday. And by disengaging the combo, what it does is it keeps these stocks in the same order. Let me go back up to the top. Here's U.S. Bank Corp, Adesto Tech, American Homes for Rent. By disengaging this, these stocks are in the same order, but I can immediately see which of them from the prior day are following through and which ones are not following through. So the top stock here, based upon these current sorts over here, a transfer of ownership. Let's go to the first test for supply. It didn't follow through. This one closed at the upper end of its range today, and it was up a little bit. American Homes for Rent. So this had a pivot yesterday. It's a REIT. Let me bring it up. Let's take a look at it. But it's in a downtrend. Still, if you're looking for a bottom fish, here's a pivot. Here's your test, and today there's a confirmation of that test. Let me zoom out on this. Let's just take a look at it. Now it's really in a counter trend, and it has been up here. Now, I stayed in the PDF file. I really don't like to see a stock with two lower lows and take that trade, and this is a good example. Here's the low right here, but here's a lower low, and here's a lower low. Now, it looked like it was going to hold, but what happens when you get stocks that generate a couple of lower lows? Here's another one here, another one here. It's a short-term trend change. So when you see a couple of days pullback and then a pivot, it's better to look for other stocks, because it could be the change in trend. And you can see that the 3 went down through the 6, so it goes into counter trend mode, and now it's trying to find a bottom. We're still not getting a decent perspective though, and to do that, what you need to do is you need to have your weekly chart up here. You can see that it's trying to hold. Ghana, you're late, but that's all right. Just a second. I'll get you the PDF if I can find the my chat box. I don't know where it went. Here it is. Just a second. Tell me if it comes up, Ghana. Now, or did that just go to Scott? Okay, you got it? Good. All right. So, you get a totally different perspective when you start looking at the weekly charts rather than just the daily charts. The weekly chart is still showing a pretty strong trend, because these are all higher lows here. This would be a higher low than down here. So it's setting up. It's trying to hold. What's a group doing though? You always have to look at the group too. This group line is down, so there's weakness here, but it's trying to set up again. I would more than likely pass on this trade, but it may be one that goes in your watch list. When you're going through this process, what you really should be doing is adding stocks to a watch list, because you don't necessarily want to do this every day, or you can do it and add stocks to your watch list, but you want to try to find the ones that are going to work the best. So anyway, this is how you do it, by disengaging the combo, and you see the ones from the prior day which are following through. But what is a better way, in addition to doing this, is if you have Thinkorswim, you want to do the intraday, and then you want to sort on the raw combo over here, because what it's doing, if I get up to the top, it's showing you which of these stocks which had the pivots are following through today. If you're just working with end of day, you're really at a disadvantage. So that's the beauty of working with them together. There's Euronav again. Here's Ruby, which I was in a while back. Let's take a look at it. It's still in the $7 price range. Advertising and marketing. I can look over here and see that 2 days ago, actually 3 days ago, because 0 is yesterday, there was a no supply, a sign of strength. So let's bring the chart up. Here's that no supply. It went down further than that, but this stock, here's another case of buying a breakout, which failed to work, and it's been drifting down ever since for the weekly. Now we're seeing some accumulation coming into it, but I certainly wouldn't touch this stock on the long side in this strong market. You got a lot of overhead resistance to deal with both on the weekly and the daily chart. But we're looking for pivots, and here is your pivot. This is why I pretty much concentrate on stocks with the fan up, because it eliminates a lot of these stocks. You're seeing a lot of the same stocks because they're passing this screen. Now, isn't it much easier and reassuring to be looking at a stock that's in an uptrend rather than a downtrend? Yeah, I'm not saying you can't find stocks that are winners, but this pivot method seems to work better with stocks that are in an uptrend. Here's your fan, and it's been basing for quite a while. Volume was above the 90 period moving average today, so this one may be setting up to go. What is it? It's another REIT, or real estate services. I am still in the EPS and revenue growth. You can see that the earnings have been really nice for this stock. They didn't have the acceleration recently, but next quarter is projected to be up slightly. It's worth putting in a folder. It yields 7.1%, so if you're looking for some potential price appreciation plus a yield, this is not a bad stock to look at. The weekly chart has been working its way up over time. You know, it's a little loosey-goosey in here, but the overall trend is up when you start looking for higher highs and higher lows and higher highs. It's moving up. So XAN is a symbol on that stock. It's worth putting in a watch list. I'm going to add it to mine. I have what I call a prime watch list. I go out and I look at and I call out the ones that are not doing well. But that way I can look at it first thing, and I also run it in Thinkorswim. I just copy the symbols and paste them into a watch list there. Okay, so this is a sort, then there's another sort in there I don't necessarily want to show you, but this lets you get organized, and it's especially effective if you're looking at all securities. So let's just, I'm going to get away from the EPS and revenue growth positive, and, well, let me bring it up here. Let's see how many of these were green today. Well, looks like over half. But, you know, you can always find some decent trades any day. Let's go to all securities. I'm going to hit my alternate space bar. And you can see there's 8,900 securities there, but I need to apply my filter because I'm concentrating only on stocks that are assigned to groups and have a low pivot today. Now let's bring this up here and let's see what my current sort is. My sort has disappeared, so let me take you through that quickly. Let's say that I'm looking, I want stocks, my goal here is to find stocks that are having a pivot and also a VPA flag. So I'll sort. I can't do that with this open. I thought I closed it. Sorry. So you can see that all of these have a 0 beside them, which means that they fired today. But this is a mess over here because the signals are not lined up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a multiple sort. Here's my first sort, VPA signals. Then I'm going to go in and I just type VPA because that takes me to everything I want. The signal condition and then the days since, VPA. Days since, this one's ascending because I want the ones that have fired most recently on top, and you can see that down here. All of these are just fired yesterday, but notice how this lines everything up nicely so you don't have to search. Everything here is stacked like it should be. And down here, as I get into transfer of ownership, see where it says no? That means that there was no VPA flag from this point down to the bottom of the 222 securities. But by sorting this way, I can see the stocks that had the most recent transfer of ownership. Transfer of ownership is kind of a neutral VPA flag because we don't know which way these stocks are going to go the next day. This one didn't do anything, but let me bring it up and show you. The transfer of ownership was right here. This was yesterday where the pivot was generated. This stock did nothing today. And what I mean by a neutral signal, transfer of ownership, there's long wicks right here. Here's a circle, which means it's going from strong hands to weak hands or weak hands to strong hands. You don't know. There's a lot of indecision here. So you really have to wait for the next day to see what happens. And obviously there was not enough support here for it to take off. So the pivot happened yesterday, didn't follow through today. Let's go back to this. Let's do a yesterday, automotive retailers. That's AutoZone. I mentioned that earlier. High volume up bar closing on the high. This is a precious metal and mining stock. Let's take a look at this. So here's your pivot. And really didn't follow through, but it would have been a buy today if you use the prior day's high as a buy. The group has been going up. Not crazy about that chart. But what I really want to mention is, in addition to what I've already mentioned, you can use this chart for any stock to see where the pivots occurred. Let's look at Tesla. I'm just taking some names and here is a pivot right here. Here were several pivots, and that was a good pivot. This was a good pivot for a few days, and then a sell-off. Here was another pivot. The buy would have been above this high, and you can see Tesla took off. Whoever was short Tesla has just been getting creamed. You know, there were some professional shorters out there that have been short Tesla, and I believe they've had to cover because Tesla, put a crosshair on here. It's using a weekly chart. It's out to a new high. Let's look at the monthly. It's out to an all-time high now. And who would have thought that not that long ago, but the shorts, if they're still in this stock, they've been creamed. I kind of got sidetracked there, but you can see all of these pivots for Tesla worked. Let's see. How about Apple? Okay, Apple. Pivot worked, pivot worked, pivot worked, pivot worked. Pivot was not executed. Pivot was not, yes, it was executed the next day. So that pivot worked there too. And you just, this is what's called a visual filter backtest. So you can go in and look at any stock and see if the pivots worked out. This pivot would not have been executed the next day anyway. So give me a stock, somebody you want to look at. Nobody has a stock for me? Okay, that's enough for now. That's enough for now. Hang on. Let's go through some of these. IMKTA. I don't know that one. I'm sorry, IMKTA. Is that in our database? Yeah, it is. I don't know this stock. Okay. This pivot here was good for a little while. Might have been stopped out. No, you wouldn't have been stopped because the low is clear down here. This pivot's good. This pivot, if you didn't take the next day but continued to watch it, would have been good. That one's never executed. That one's never executed. We have not had any more green pivots at that point, and that's because it was in a counter trend here with the red being above the green, or the 3 being below the 6. Okay. Let's look at SCHW. Okay, lots of good pivots here. This pivot, you'd probably been in. I don't think you'd have been stopped out. It depends on how close your stop is, but it would be below this pivot right here. Went up and then it reversed, of course. You'd probably have a trailing stop on that one. Okay, ACAD. But you should look at your stocks that you're considering trading and see if this worked for them historically in the past. Just remember that it has to take out either the high of the day the signal was generated or the prior day's high, depending on how much you want it to go. Now, this wasn't executed on the following day. If they're not executed the following day, I usually quit following them. I got a couple more messages here, it looks like, on my... But there were some good pivots here. But this right here, this is one of those... it's either earnings or news announcements where they get a gap up and the trader just sell into it, and you're left holding the bag if you chase a stock like that. Happens all the time. Okay, Tom wants to look at NEO. NEO's been a really good trade. Okay, NEO. Didn't get a pivot until right here. That was a good pivot. Another pivot here, another pivot here, which is good. So yeah, several good pivots. SWKS. Lots of good pivots here. This one was not executed. This one was executed, even though it had a a magenta bar because it was still in a counter trend and the VPOC was negative, but it was executed. If your buy stops in above there, and that one really, that's a good trade there. Lots of good trades here. This one was not executed the next day. It would have been a few days later. Okay. MAXR. You can do this on your own though. Of course, you have to have my files. Maxar, this is good. Here's a good trade here. Here's a good trade here, which would not have been stopped out. Really good trade here. This was a bad, well, it was good for a day or two. This one was not executed. Yeah, I always place my stops under the pivot. If I'm wrong, I want to be wrong early, Kevin. Okay, I think I covered everything on the list. But you get the idea here that, looking back on time on a lot of these stocks, these pivots work. And you aren't risking a lot of money. That's why it's a good method to do or to take advantage of. Okay, I see I'm 7 minutes over already, so I better give it up. Any questions before I go? John, I don't know what to tell you about that. I know you've always had trouble with Max too. Aren't there other products out there that do the same thing? I don't know. I haven't looked around. Send that question to Matt. I can't do anything about it. Okay, well, thank you for listening. I will get this video posted hopefully today. I'm gone tomorrow, so I won't get it up on YouTube until Saturday, but I'll send it out to the Insider Club. All right, well, thanks for coming, and I hope you learned something, and I want you to practice with these pivots. Okay, thanks everybody for coming.